November 20th, 1917. Hundreds of British tanks roll through Cambrai, France. Machine guns tear through infantry. German artillery shells flip tanks and bury men alive under them. By the end of the day, tens of thousands of troops will be dead. But let's change one thing. Instead of clunky Mark V tanks rolling over the war-torn landscape, comes something no one understands. An M1A2 Abrams main battle tank. A 70-ton giant dropped into the battlefield nearly 75 years too soon. Gas turbine engines screaming like a jet, armor forged from composites and depleted uranium, and a 120mm smoothbore gun that can obliterate anything in its path. So what happens when a single modern tank, backed by nearly a century of military advancement, goes head-to-head with World War I-era Germany? Is it enough to change history? Will it make an impact at all? Or is it just one tank against the military might of an entire country? Let's find out. First, let's take a look at what we just sent over 100 years back in time. The M1A2 Abrams is powered by a 1,500 horsepower gas turbine engine, the kind you'd normally find on a jet aircraft. This monster drinks jet fuel, diesel, or even regular gasoline if it has to. It can hit speeds over 40 miles per hour, which is absurd compared to World War I tanks that struggled to crawl faster than a jogging man. Its armor is a classified blend of composites and depleted uranium, designed to shrug off modern anti-tank weapons that wouldn't exist for another 70 years. Against 1917 artillery, it might as well be invincible. And then there's the firepower. Its primary weapon is the M256 120mm smoothbore cannon, firing depleted uranium or tungsten sabot rounds at hypersonic speeds. These rounds can punch through modern tank armor at over 2 miles away. Against a Mark V tank with its riveted steel plates, those shells would slice through like a hot knife through butter. Add a coaxial 7.62mm machine gun capable of firing 800 rounds per minute, and a roof-mounted 50 caliber M2 Browning that can tear through concrete walls, and the Abrams is basically a mobile apocalypse on treads. But here's the thing. Germany isn't going to make this easy. At Cambrai, the Germans had constructed one of the most formidable defensive networks of the entire war. Deep trench systems reinforced with concrete bunkers, belts of barbed wire thick enough to stop entire battalions, heavy machine gun positions that could sweep no man's land with overlapping fields of fire. And behind all of that, massed artillery batteries ready to rain hell on anything that moved. Against the British Mark V tanks, crawling at 4 miles per hour, armed with 6-pounder guns and protected by armor barely thicker than a car door, these defenses were devastating. Dozens of tanks were knocked out. Thousands of men died. But against an Abrams, things get very, very interesting. The morning mist hangs heavy over the French countryside. German machine gunners peer through the fog, waiting for the familiar rumble of British tanks. They've beaten them before. They'll beat them again. Then they hear it. Not the clanking, wheezing struggle of a Mark V, but something else entirely. A high-pitched mechanical scream that sounds like no engine they've ever heard. The Abrams emerges from the fog. German gunners open fire immediately, stitching lines of 7.92mm bullets across its bow. In any normal engagement, this would at least slow the enemy down, force them to button up, buy time for artillery. The bullets bounce off harmlessly. Sparks fly. The tank doesn't even flinch. A thunderous crack rips through the air, louder than any gun the Germans have ever heard. A concrete bunker 800 meters away simply ceases to exist. One moment it's there, a fortified position that cost British forces 200 casualties to even approach yesterday. The next moment, it's a crater. Wooden beams, stone blocks, sandbags, and men erupt into the sky in a cloud of dust and fire. The machine gunners who once commanded no man's land are vaporized in a single strike. The Abrams doesn't stop. Its turret rotates with mechanical precision. Smooth, fast, impossible by 1917 standards. Another boom. A second strong point hidden behind sandbags and barbed wire vanishes in a blast that throws nearby troops into the air like rag dolls. The shockwave alone knocks men off their feet 50 meters away. Soldiers accustomed to the slow, methodical bark of 6-pounder guns have no frame of reference for the raw violence of a 120mm smoothbore firing high-explosive rounds. It's not just superior firepower, it's firepower from another dimension of warfare entirely. Officers scream orders, but panic is already spreading through the German lines like wildfire. German officers scramble to deploy their trump card, the 77mm FK-96 NA field gun. This artillery piece had been the backbone of German anti-tank defenses, deadly against British armor. Crews had knocked out dozens of Mark V's with it. They swing their cannons toward the Abrams and open fire. The first shell screams across the battlefield and smashes directly into the Abrams' glacis plate. A direct hit. At this range, it would gut any World War I tank. The impact is meaningless. The shell, traveling at maybe 1,500 feet per second, hits armor designed to withstand modern sabot rounds, traveling at over 5,000 feet per second. It's like throwing a baseball at a battleship. The Abrams' composite armor, layered with depleted uranium, doesn't even dent. The tank doesn't slow down, doesn't swerve, doesn't acknowledge the hit at all. The German gun crew frantically reloads. They manage to fire twice more before the Abrams turret swings toward them with terrifying speed. One round. That's all it takes. The armor-piercing sabot round, a dart of depleted uranium traveling faster than most rifle bullets, smashes into the German gun position and turns everything into a fireball. Cannon, crew, ammunition stores, all of it disappears in an explosion that leaves nothing but scorched earth and twisted metal. Where British tanks might take hours to suppress a single artillery position, advancing under covering fire while taking heavy casualties, the Abrams eliminates them in seconds. Another gun position tries to engage. Same result. The Germans keep shooting, and the Abrams keeps erasing them from existence with surgical precision. Within 20 minutes, the German artillery defense at Cambrai, the defense that historically held the British advance to just 5 miles, is shattered. British infantry surge forward in the Abrams' wake, following the path of destruction it's carving through German lines. In the real Battle of Cambrai, troops often had to clear trenches by hand, fighting room to room with grenades, bayonets, and desperate close-quarters combat that left thousands dead for every 100 yards gained. Now, the Abrams coaxial machine gun opens up, spraying 7.62mm rounds at a rate World War I soldiers can barely comprehend. Where a Mark V might have a single machine gun with limited traverse, the Abrams can sweep its coaxial weapon across entire trench lines without even moving its hull. Trenches that took months to dig collapse under continuous fire. Wooden supports splinter. Dirt walls cave in. German troops who had been trained to stand their ground even against tanks, because World War I tanks were slow enough to engage with grenades and close-range fire, break and run. They've never encountered anything like this. The noise alone is beyond anything in their experience. The Mark V tanks they knew clanked and groaned and could be heard coming from miles away. The Abrams turbine engine screams like a banshee, and when it fires, the sound physically hurts. Horses bolt in terror, overturning ammunition carts and supply wagons. Officers scream for order that never comes. Entire companies dissolve into fleeing mobs. The Abrams rolls straight into the heart of the German defensive line, a position that historically took British forces most of the day to even reach, costing over 4,000 casualties. The tank reaches it in under an hour with minimal friendly losses. Its treads grind through barbed wire like it isn't there. It crushes trench walls, roll Ellis directly over machine gun nests, and buries dugouts as it passes overhead. Soldiers trapped underground find themselves entombed as tons of modern armor compress the earth above them. It's not just a military advance. It's a demonstration of technological dominance so complete that it breaks the enemy's will to fight. German reinforcements arrive. Elite stormtroopers, the Kaiserschlacht assault troops that had terrorized Allied lines for years, charge forward to plug the breakthrough. These men are the best Germany has, highly trained in infiltration tactics, equipped with flamethrowers, grenades, and the latest small arms. Against British tanks, stormtroopers had been devastatingly effective. They knew how to get close, exploit blind spots, jam tracks with grenades, and set tanks ablaze with flamethrowers at close range. They'd knocked out dozens of Mark V's against the Abrams. It's a slaughter. The stormtroopers try their proven tactics. They advance under covering fire, use shell craters for cover, and get within grenade range. Stick grenades, the iconic potato mashers, detonate against the Abrams armor with sharp cracks. The explosions don't even scratch the paint. Flamethrowers shoot gouts of burning fuel across the tank's hull, flames that would set a Mark V ablaze and cook the crew inside. The fire washes over the Abrams armor plating and dissipates harmlessly. The tank is designed to operate in chemical warfare conditions and resist temperatures over 1,500 degrees Celsius. World War I flamethrowers don't even register as a threat. Meanwhile, the Abrams turret rotates. The 50 caliber M2 Browning opens fire. This weapon alone, just the secondary armament, fires rounds that can punch through brick walls and light armor. Against infantry, the effect is apocalyptic. Each half-inch bullet tears through multiple men. Bodies don't just fall, they come apart. Entire stormtrooper squads disappear in seconds. The survivors break and run, abandoning their elite training, abandoning their weapons, just desperate to get away from the nightmare bearing down on them. German commanders, watching from their command posts, try their last resort: heavy artillery. The truly big guns, 210mm howitzers positioned miles behind the lines, begin firing. These are siege weapons designed to destroy fortifications. Shells the size of bathtubs arc through the sky and crash down around the Abrams. One detonates just meters away, throwing up a geyser of mud, shrapnel, and fire. The explosion is so massive it would obliterate any World War I tank instantly. The smoke clears. The Abrams grinds forward, treads churning through the crater the shell just created. Its suspension, designed for cross-country travel at 40 miles per hour, absorbs the shock. Its armor holds firm. The crew inside barely feels the impact. Where a Mark V would be flipped, torn apart, or buried under collapsing earth, the Abrams just keeps moving forward like an unstoppable metal god. By 9 a.m., the British breakthrough at Cambrai has already surpassed anything achieved historically. Trenches that cost thousands of lives to capture are taken in under 3 hours. German positions that held for days crumble in minutes. The Abrams uses its advanced optics to identify targets over a mile away, targets that World War I gunners can't even see yet, and eliminates them with single shots. Every round is a kill. Every engagement is one-sided. The psychological effect is as devastating as the physical destruction. German troops have faced tanks before, but those tanks were beatable. Slow, clumsy, vulnerable. This is something beyond their understanding of warfare. It's not just advanced technology, it's magic, as far as they're concerned. Entire regiments break and flee. Officers who try to rally their men are ignored or shot by panicked soldiers desperate to retreat. The German defensive line, one of the strongest on the Western Front, collapses completely. British troops advancing behind the Abrams capture thousands of prisoners, overrun artillery positions without firing a shot, and take objectives that weren't even scheduled to be attacked until tomorrow. For a few glorious hours, it seems like the Abrams might actually change the war. But then reality sets in. The Abrams is an apex predator, but it's also a desperately hungry one. Its gas turbine engine burns fuel at a rate that would be unthinkable in 1917, approximately 60 gallons per hour under combat conditions. It carries 500 gallons of fuel, enough for maybe 250 miles under ideal circumstances, and combat is far from ideal. In modern warfare, the Abrams operates with sophisticated logistics, fuel trucks carrying JP-8, forward supply bases, aerial refueling operations. Here in 1917 France, there's none of that. The British refuel their Mark V tanks with gasoline refined from coal, low-grade fuel full of impurities and contaminants. That fuel would destroy the Abrams' precision turbine engines in minutes. The tank's crew watches the fuel gauge tick downward with every yard traveled, every shell fired, every burst from the machine guns. They've been on the battlefield for less than 4 hours, but already the reserves are running dangerously low. And that's not the only problem. The Abrams carries 40 rounds for its main gun, a generous load by modern standards, where engagements might involve only a handful of shots. But here, firing at fortifications, bunkers, artillery positions, and massed infantry, those 40 rounds are going fast. The crew has been rationing ammunition for the last hour, trying to make every shot count, but the mathematics are brutal. Even with perfect accuracy, 40 rounds can only destroy 40 targets. There are thousands of German soldiers on this battlefield. The engine note changes. The high-pitched scream of the turbine starts to waver, dropping in pitch. The crew knows what that means. They're running on fumes. 11:30 a.m. The Abrams clears one final bunker line, its main gun roaring for what might be the last time. The shell obliterates a German command post, sending papers and bodies flying through the air. Then the engine sputters. The treads slow. The mechanical god falls silent. The Abrams sits motionless in the French mud, an immovable steel fortress, but a fortress that can no longer move, can no longer fight. British troops swarm around the dead tank, awestruck. Mechanics and engineers approach cautiously, like primitive humans discovering an alien spacecraft. They pry at its armor, finding materials decades ahead of their time. They peer at the turbine engine, a piece of technology they have no framework to even understand, let alone repair. Could they refuel it? Technically, yes. The Abrams can run on multiple fuel types, but without jet fuel or clean diesel, the engine would degrade rapidly. Each time they ran it on 1917 gasoline, they'd be shortening its operational life. Could they repair it if something broke? Absolutely not. The Abrams contains electronics, composite materials, and precision-engineered components that wouldn't be invented for half a century. A single damaged part might be impossible to replace with 1917 technology. Could they reproduce the ammunition? The depleted uranium sabot rounds? The high explosive shells with their advanced shaped charges? Not a chance. The metallurgy alone is beyond World War I capabilities. The tank might run again with enough improvisation and luck. But without ammunition, it would be reduced to an armored battering ram. Intimidating, but not the war-winning weapon it had been for those brief, glorious hours. Still, the impact of those hours cannot be denied. The Abrams dominated the battlefield while it operated. It saved thousands of British lives by breaking German defenses that would have cost weeks of bloody fighting to overcome. It terrified German troops so thoroughly that entire units fled at the mere rumor of its approach. Intelligence reports would spread through the German army like wildfire. The British have a new weapon, unstoppable, invincible, capable of destroying entire battalions single-handedly. Officers would demand answers. Engineers would be ordered to ELOP countermeasures against a threat they couldn't even properly describe. The psychological impact would ripple through the German high command for months. How do you plan a defense against a weapon you don't understand? How do you maintain morale when your troops believe the enemy has unleashed something supernatural? But here's the brutal reality. World War I was fought on a scale almost incomprehensible. The Battle of Cambrai alone involved over 400,000 troops across both sides. The Western Front stretched for 450 miles, with millions of men dug into trenches from Switzerland to the North Sea. One tank, even a miracle weapon from the future, cannot change those mathematics. The Abrams won a battle. It couldn't win the war. So what really happens when you drop a modern tank into World War I? For a few hours, it becomes the most dominant weapon on the battlefield. It saves lives, breaks through defenses that would have taken weeks to overcome, and spreads terror through enemy ranks. It demonstrates that technology can create advantages so overwhelming that traditional warfare becomes obsolete. But it also reveals the limits of technology without logistics, without support, without the infrastructure to sustain it. The Abrams was designed for modern combined arms warfare, coordinated with air support, resupplied by sophisticated logistics networks, maintained by trained technicians with access to advanced parts and tools. Strip all that away, and even the world's best tank becomes a very expensive paperweight once it runs out of fuel. The Germans would eventually regroup. They'd realize the superweapon only appeared once. They'd test their artillery and find that while their standard guns couldn't hurt it, their heavy howitzers could at least immobilize it with near misses. They'd adapt, as armies always do. And the war would grind on, as it did historically, until exhaustion and attrition finally brought it to an end in 1918. The Abrams would become a legend, a strange metal beast that appeared one morning in 1917 and vanished into history. British soldiers would tell stories about it for the rest of their lives, and German soldiers would have nightmares about it. But it wouldn't change the fundamental equation of World War I. Millions of men, thousands of miles of trenches, and a meat grinder that no single weapon could stop. Sometimes, even a miracle isn't enough. What do you think would happen? Could a modern tank actually change the outcome of World War I if it had unlimited fuel and ammunition? Or is the war simply too big, too entrenched, too brutal for any single weapon to make a difference? Let me know in the comments. And if you're curious what would happen if an F-22 Raptor fought in World War I, check out the video on the screen now. Thanks for watching.